A German shepherd abandoned in a sack in the river touched lives forever. His miraculous rescue revealed a story of cruelty that no one imagined. Between life and death, this four-legged warrior fought with a strength that moved everyone. A journey of redemption, unconditional love, and second chances that will transform your heart. Get ready to be moved. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment from which city you are following this incredible story. On a foggy autumn morning in the small riverside town of Rivertown, the gray sky was reflected in the murky waters of the river that snaked through the valley. The mist hung like a ghostly shroud over the surface, creating an almost mystical atmosphere. Jennifer Smith, a young biology teacher at the local high school, walked intently along the rocky bank. The morning dew dampened her boots as she carefully collected samples for her upcoming class on river ecosystems. It was then that an almost imperceptible sound cut through the morning silence. A distant, weak lament, almost a sigh. Jennifer stopped collecting, straining her ears. Again the sound, a muffled moan coming from somewhere near the river bend. Following her instinct, she advanced with cautious steps over the slippery stones. The sight she found froze her blood. Partially submerged, trapped between two sharp rocks, a soaked burlap sack swayed gently with the current. The movement of the sack was irregular. Something inside it was still moving. With her heart racing, Jennifer approached, balancing precariously on the slick stones. Her hands trembled as she untied the knot that closed the sack. When she finally managed to open it, her eyes met a pair of amber eyes that stared at her with a mixture of terror and pleading. A German shepherd, skeletal and trembling, breathed with difficulty. His fur, which should have been imposing, was soaked and plastered to his thin body. Even so, in those almost extinguished eyes, Jennifer perceived a spark of life, an inner strength that refused to be extinguished. "My God," she whispered as indignation and compassion took over her. Who would do such a thing? Without hesitation, Jennifer removed her waterproof jacket and wrapped it around the trembling animal. The dog offered no resistance. He was too weak to do so. With considerable effort, she lifted the animal into her arms, surprised at how light he was. She could feel his prominent ribs through the wet fabric. "Hold on," she murmured to the animal, as she hurried along the muddy path that led back to town. "I'm going to help you." The veterinary clinic in Rivertown was a 10-minute walk away. Jennifer felt her muscles burn with the effort, but she did not slow down. Each weak breath from the dog in her arms was a reminder of the urgency of the situation. The bell on the clinic door jingled violently as she pushed it open with her shoulder. Dr. Michael Davis, a gray-haired gentleman who had cared for the region's animals for over 30 years, emerged from the examination room with a worried expression. "Jennifer, what happened?" "I found him in the river," she gasped, carefully placing the animal on the examination table. "Inside a sack. Someone tried to—" Her voice failed, unable to complete the sentence. The veterinarian had already taken command of the situation, his movements calm and precise, contrasting with the evident anguish in his eyes. "We'll need to warm him up immediately. Severe hypothermia," he diagnosed, as he connected an IV to the animal. "Advanced malnutrition. Judging by his condition, he must have been without proper food for weeks." While Dr. Davis worked, Jennifer watched anxiously. It was then that she noticed something metallic shining faintly on the animal's neck. A tag partially covered by the soaked fur. With gentle fingers, she moved the fur aside to reveal a military identification tag, with numbers and letters partially erased by time and corrosion. "Doctor, look at this," Jennifer called. "He has a military ID." Dr. Davis adjusted his reading glasses and examined the tag with curiosity. "Interesting. This is no ordinary dog, Jennifer. He must have served in the armed forces. These dogs are specially trained, true four-legged heroes." He turned his attention back to the animal. "What could have happened for you to end up like this, soldier?" The next few hours were critical. The veterinarian worked tirelessly to stabilize the German shepherd, while Jennifer remained at the clinic, unable to abandon the animal she had rescued. When the dog finally began to respond positively to treatment, she felt immense relief. "He's a fighter," commented Dr. Davis, observing the vital signs that were now stabilizing. Many wouldn't have survived these conditions. This fellow has an impressive will to live. Valiant, murmured Jennifer, almost to herself. That's his name. Valiant. The name spread quickly through the small town. Rivertown, with its few thousand inhabitants, functioned like a large family. By the end of the day, practically everyone knew about the military German Shepherd rescued from the river. Many stopped by the clinic to see the animal, some bringing blankets, others special food for his recovery. For Jennifer, however, that immediate connection with Valiant represented a deep personal dilemma. Just 6 months earlier, she had lost Luna, her 15-year-old cat, after a painful battle against aggressive cancer. The grief had been so devastating that Jennifer had made a promise to herself, never to become emotionally attached to another animal. The pain of loss was simply unbearable. However, as she watched Valiant fighting for his life, something within her transformed. An invisible, almost inexplicable connection formed between them. Perhaps it was the animal's gaze, those amber eyes that, even in adversity, conveyed an unbreakable dignity. He can stay at the clinic during the initial recovery, explained Dr. Davis. But eventually he'll need a home. Dogs with military training usually don't adapt well to regular shelters. Jennifer bit her lip, feeling the internal conflict intensify. I'll think about it, she replied, knowing that her mind was already making a decision that her heart feared. In the following weeks, Jennifer divided her time between biology classes and daily visits to the clinic. Valiant recovered slowly, gaining weight and vigor. The first moment the dog managed to stand on his own, wobbly but determined, brought tears to the teacher's eyes. When the day finally arrived that Dr. Davis declared Valiant could leave the clinic, Jennifer had already transformed a corner of her small house into a space for the dog. A padded bed, new food bowls, appropriate toys, everything carefully chosen with the animal's comfort in mind. "Welcome to your new home, Temporary," she explained to the dog as she opened the house door. "At least until we find out your full story." It was on the first night that Jennifer noticed something peculiar. When trying to make Valiant sit using commands in Portuguese, the dog remained impassive. Out of curiosity, she tried "sits," the command in German, and Valiant immediately sat down, looking at her attentively. "So you understand German," she murmured, fascinated. "Who would have trained you?" In the following days, other unusual behaviors manifested. Valiant methodically inspected the yard every morning, as if performing a patrol. When let loose in the backyard, he always positioned himself strategically, at points that offered a wide view of the grounds. And, more intriguingly, on certain occasions he seemed to alert himself to sounds that Jennifer could not even detect. But the most mysterious behavior occurred on full moon nights. On these occasions, Valiant positioned himself by the window and let out a long, melancholic howl, always facing north. It was a sound charged with emotion, almost human in its expression of loss. "What are you looking for?" Jennifer asked, stroking the animal's head. "Or who?" Intrigued by the dog's history, Jennifer began researching German Shepherds used in military operations. She discovered that these animals were trained for specific missions, some for explosives detection, others for search and rescue, some for protection. The training was rigorous and created an almost indissoluble bond between the dog and his handler. "Someone must be missing you," she commented to Valiant one afternoon while organizing the samples collected from the river. "Someone who speaks German and knows your commands." As if the universe were answering her speculation, the next morning a stranger appeared in town. A man of approximately 40 years old with a rigid posture that betrayed military training. His most noticeable feature was the mechanical leg that replaced his lower right limb, on which he leaned with a cane. The man toured the town asking questions about a missing German Shepherd. When people mentioned Valiant and his rescue story, the stranger's interest visibly intensified. It was a matter of hours before he knocked on Jennifer's door. "Good morning, miss," he greeted formally. "My name is Colonel Rodriguez. I am looking for a military dog that disappeared during an operation. I believe he may be with you." Jennifer felt a pang in her chest. She had already considered the possibility of eventually returning Valiant to his rightful owner, but facing that reality so soon was painful. Still, she invited the man in. "He's in the backyard," she explained, leading the visitor. "His name is Valiant. At least that's what I call him." Colonel Rodriguez nodded. An appropriate name. In fact, his operational code was K9 Delta. When they entered the backyard, Valiant was lying under the shade of a mango tree. Upon seeing the stranger, the dog stood up, alert, but showing no recognition. There was no enthusiastic reaction that Jennifer would expect from a dog reuniting with his handler. "Delta, come," ordered the colonel, using the German command for come. Valiant looked at the man, then at Jennifer, but did not move. He remained still, observing the stranger with what seemed to be indifference, perhaps even distrust. The colonel frowned. He must be confused. He's been through trauma. Something about the situation aroused Jennifer's suspicion. If this man really was Valiant's handler, shouldn't the dog recognize him even after weeks apart? "When did you say you lost him?" she asked casually. "About 2 weeks ago," replied the colonel promptly, "during a routine operation nearby." Jennifer kept a neutral expression, but her mind calculated quickly. 2 weeks? Valiant's state of malnutrition when she found him suggested a much more prolonged abandonment. At least a month, maybe more, according to Dr. Davis. "I see," she replied, keeping her suspicion to herself. "Well, he's still recovering. The vet recommended that he not be moved for now." The colonel seemed displeased but nodded. "I will return with the appropriate documents. This dog is military property and needs to return to his duties as soon as he is fit." After the visitor left, Jennifer watched Valiant with concern. The dog had gone back to lying down, apparently unperturbed, but she noticed a subtle tension in his posture that was not there before. "Who is he really, Valiant? And who are you?" The opportunity to investigate further arose during the traditional river festival, an annual celebration where residents thanked the river that sustained the local economy based on fishing and agriculture. After a few weeks in her care, Valiant had progressed enough to accompany her to the event. The festival was a colorful spectacle. Boats decorated with flowers sailed on the river while musicians played and children danced on the banks. Jennifer walked with Valiant through the central square, where stalls sold crafts and typical foods. The dog attracted admiring glances. His recovery was visible in his shiny fur and restored stately bearing. It was during the procession of decorated boats that the incident occurred. A young man was photographing the event from one of the main boats. Valiant, who until then had been walking quietly beside Jennifer, suddenly tensed up. A low growl vibrated in his throat as his eyes fixed on the photographer. Before Jennifer could react, Valiant began to bark frantically, pulling hard on the leash towards the boat. The photographer, noticing the dog, had a surprising reaction. He paled visibly, dropped his professional camera into the water, and, in seconds, had disappeared into the crowd. Valiant, quiet. Jennifer tried to calm the dog, perplexed by his reaction. In all the weeks he had been in her care, he had never shown aggression. The scene did not go unnoticed. Several people turned to watch, including the mayor of the town, who approached with a worried expression. "Is everything all right, teacher? Is that dog safe?" "Yes, Mr. Mayor," she assured, still confused. "Valiant has never acted like this before. Something about that photographer disturbed him." The mayor seemed to accept the explanation, but Jennifer could not forget the incident. Who was that photographer? And why had Valiant reacted so intensely to his presence? In the following days, curiosity turned into methodical investigation. Using her scientific background, Jennifer began to gather information. Her first stop was the public library, where Mrs. Johnson, a 70-year-old lady who had worked as a librarian since her youth, kept all the local newspapers in meticulous archives. "I need to research any military operation that may have occurred nearby in recent months," Jennifer explained. Mrs. Johnson adjusted her thick-framed glasses. Military operation? Nothing official, dear, but there were rumors." Lowering her voice, she continued. About 3 months ago, some fishermen saw strange activity near the river's source. Uniformed men, equipment. The local paper published, small note, but the article was removed from the next edition. Very strange. After hours hunched over old newspapers, Jennifer finally found what she was looking for. A small report briefly mentioned a supposed secret military operation that had gone wrong near the river's source. The authorities had officially denied it, but the newspaper included testimonies from residents and a blurry photo where a dog very similar to Valiant could be distinguished. On the way back home, Jennifer mentally connected the dots. A secret operation, a military dog, a photographer who seemed to recognize Valiant and feared being recognized by him, Colonel Rodriguez with his inconsistent story. Something serious had happened, something someone wanted to cover up. Meanwhile, Valiant continued to surprise. His physical recovery was remarkable. His fur was once again shiny and thick. Defined muscles reappeared under his skin. More impressive, however, were his skills. He found hidden objects with impressive ease, even when Jennifer hid them in seemingly impossible places. One morning during a walk along the forest trail that bordered the river, Valiant suddenly blocked Jennifer's path, refusing to let her advance. Confused, she tried to go around him, only to discover a large hole camouflaged by foliage that would certainly have caused a serious accident. "How did you know?" she asked, gratefully stroking the animal. At night, however, the daytime progress contrasted with nighttime nightmares. Valiant frequently woke up trembling, emitting anguished whimpers. In these moments, Jennifer sat beside him on the floor, murmuring words of comfort until he calmed down. What memories tormented that animal? The 3rd month after the rescue brought a devastating storm to Rivertown. For 3 days, torrential rains lashed the region, dangerously raising the river level. Many riverside families had to be evacuated, and the city declared a state of emergency. On the 3rd night of the storm, Jennifer was awakened by the absence of Valiant beside her. Normally, the dog slept near her bed, alert to any noise. Alarmed, she searched the house calling for him, only to find the back door open, banging violently in the wind. "Valiant!" she shouted in panic, quickly putting on a waterproof jacket over her pajamas. The rain fell relentlessly as she went out into the stormy night, illuminating the way with a flashlight. Her heart sank when she realized where Valiant's footprints led, directly to the river. Could it be that the trauma had drawn him back, to the place where he almost lost his life? Running desperately along the muddy path, Jennifer called for him incessantly, her voice almost muffled by the thunder. The scene she found, however, was not what she feared. On the bank of the river, now overflowing and furious, Valiant was digging frantically in the mud near a tree recently felled by the force of the water. He was so focused on his task that he did not even notice Jennifer's approach. "Valiant, what are you doing?" The dog turned briefly to her before returning to digging, as if trying to communicate the urgency of his mission. Intrigued, Jennifer approached to observe. The flashlight revealed something metallic emerging from the churned mud. A handle. With Valiant's help, she pulled the object, a muddy military backpack, but still intact. Sheltering under a rocky overhang, Jennifer examined the contents of the backpack. Inside, protected in sealed plastic bags, she found documents, maps, a damaged electronic device, and, more significantly, a personal diary. With trembling hands, she opened the small covered notebook. The first page identified the owner: Lieutenant Emily Carter, Environmental Reconnaissance Division, U.S. Army. The diary entries revealed a disturbing story. Lieutenant Emily Carter led a secret environmental investigation mission at the sources of the river that supplied Rivertown. Her team had discovered evidence of illegal chemical contamination, apparently originating from a company that dumped toxic waste in the region. The last entry, dated 3 months earlier, expressed concerns about mission security. "We intercepted suspicious communications. Someone leaked information about our investigation. Valiant detected unidentified chemical odors near the camp yesterday. I requested immediate extraction, but the response was evasive. If anything happens to me, may someone find this diary and take care of my loyal partner, Valiant." Jennifer looked at the dog, who waited patiently beside her, raindrops dripping from his fur. "So it was her," she whispered. "Emily was your partner." In the following days, while the community recovered from the flood damage, Jennifer discreetly began her own investigation. Using her biology knowledge, she collected water samples at various points along the river, especially near the place where they found the backpack. The preliminary analyses she performed in the school laboratory were alarming. High concentrations of heavy metals and volatile organic compounds, typical of untreated industrial waste. The population of Rivertown depended directly on the river for survival, fishing, irrigation, water supply. If those chemicals were present throughout the river, the consequences would be devastating. 4 months after Valiant's rescue, the unexpected happened. Colonel Rodriguez returned to town, this time accompanied by 2 police cars and a representative from City Hall. With official documents in hand, he demanded the immediate return of military asset K9 Delta. "I'm sorry, miss, but this dog is property of the Army," he declared, handing the paperwork to the city representative. "He is assigned to special operations and needs to return immediately." Jennifer examined the documents with growing apprehension. They seemed legitimate, with official stamps and signatures. Still, something didn't fit, especially considering the information in Lieutenant Emily Carter's diary. "I need some time to say goodbye properly," she requested, gaining a few precious days. The news of Valiant's possible departure spread quickly through the small town. To Jennifer's surprise, the community mobilized spontaneously. Valiant had become a kind of unofficial mascot of Rivertown, a symbol of resilience and overcoming adversity. Fishermen, merchants, teachers, even the school children, everyone, spoke out against his removal. The mayor, sensitive to the public outcry, invoked an old local tradition. Whoever was saved by the river's waters belonged eternally to Rivertown. It was a folkloric tradition, without legal value, but enough to justify a public hearing before any final decision was made. The hearing was scheduled for the following week at City Hall. As the date approached, Jennifer worked incessantly on 2 fronts, preparing arguments to keep Valiant in her care and analyzing the collected water samples. The analyses confirmed her initial suspicions: systematic chemical contamination at specific points along the river. On the morning of the hearing, the City Hall auditorium was packed. Jennifer took her place with Valiant sitting obediently beside her. Colonel Rodriguez sat on the opposite side, accompanied by 2 men in suits. At the main table, the mayor and 3 council members would preside over the proceedings. To their right, surprisingly, was Judge Robert Thompson, the district judge, a reserved man who rarely participated in community events. The mayor opened the session explaining the purpose of the hearing. Colonel Rodriguez was the first to speak, detailing the loss of a military dog during routine exercises and the need for his immediate return for national security. He presented documents, technical reports, legal arguments, all seemingly refutable. When it was Jennifer's turn, she opted for a different approach. Instead of directly contesting the documents, she narrated Valiant's story, his deplorable state when she found him, his miraculous recovery, his adaptation to the community. She spoke about the special bond they had developed. She mentioned how the dog had become part of the town, attending school, participating in community events, even helping in the recent rescue of a child during the floods. "This is not just a dog," she concluded emotionally. "He is a member of our community, and I believe he also has the right to choose." It was at that moment that Valiant, until then quiet beside her, suddenly became alert. His ears perked up, his body tensed, his amber eyes fixed on Judge Robert Thompson, who had just stood up to ask a question. A low growl emanated from his throat. "Control your animal, miss," ordered the judge with visible discomfort. But Valiant's behavior was unprecedented. In all the public events they had attended, he had never shown aggression. Something about the judge had triggered that reaction. "Valiant, quiet," Jennifer commanded, intrigued. To test a sudden theory, she whispered discreetly, "Valiant, where ist er?" "Who is he?" in German. The dog's reaction was immediate and unequivocal. His barks became more intense, directed specifically at the judge. The commotion that followed almost ended the hearing prematurely, but was interrupted by a female voice that echoed in the entrance of the hall. He recognized him. Valiant never forgets a face. Everyone turned to the newcomer, a woman of approximately 30 years old, short brown hair and military posture. She limped slightly as she walked down the central aisle. Lieutenant Emily Carter, she introduced herself, showing her military ID. Official handler of K9 Valiant, and from what I gather, someone you presumed dead. What followed was a bombshell revelation. Emily Carter had not perished as everyone assumed. After the accident that dispersed her team during the environmental investigation mission, she had suffered a serious leg injury and was found by a fisherman who took her for treatment in a distant city. She had spent months hospitalized, undergoing multiple surgeries, unable to contact her immediate superiors, many of whom she now suspected were involved in the conspiracy to silence her. The most emotional moment of the hearing was the reunion between Emily Carter and Valiant. Upon seeing her, the German Shepherd transformed completely. He jumped, barked, whimpered with joy, licking his former partner's face while his tail wagged frantically. "My loyal friend," whispered Emily Carter, kneeling to hug the dog, tears streaming freely down her face. "You survived. You survived." Subsequent revelations unearthed a complex plot. Judge Robert Thompson worked as a consultant for the chemical company QTX, investigated by Emily Carter's military team. The company illegally dumped toxic waste at the river's sources, saving millions in proper waste treatment. Colonel Rodriguez, in fact, was not a colonel. He was a mercenary hired to recover the evidence that Emily Carter had collected. In the months that followed, Rivertown found itself at the center of a federal investigation into environmental crimes. Emily Carter, officially reinstated to military service, chose to settle temporarily in the town to oversee the process. Jennifer offered her guest room, creating an unexpected partnership, the scientist and the soldier, united by Valiant. Together, the three formed a formidable team on the mission to map and evidence the river's contamination. Jennifer contributed her scientific knowledge, Emily Carter with her military experience and institutional contacts, and Valiant with his extraordinarily sensitive nose for chemicals. The dog could detect minimal concentrations of contaminants, guiding them precisely to the points where the waste was dumped. QTX, the company responsible for the contamination, tried to discredit the evidence they presented, using its economic and political influence. It hired scientists to challenge the results, suggesting that the contamination could have natural origins. The situation reached a critical point during the traditional river swimming competition, part of the town's biannual festivities. Despite Jennifer and Emily Carter's warnings about the risks in certain areas of the river, City Hall, pressured by QTX, allowed the event to take place. During the competition, exactly in the area that Valiant had indicated as contaminated, one of the swimmers developed a severe allergic reaction, requiring emergency hospitalization. The incident, although regrettable, provided irrefutable evidence of the presence of contaminants in the river. The public outrage that followed forced the authorities to act. QTX faced multi-million-dollar fines and criminal lawsuits. Its executives were arrested, including Judge Robert Thompson, whose participation in the scheme was widely documented thanks to Emily Carter's diary and the recovered evidence. However, victory brought a new dilemma for Rivertown. QTX employed almost a quarter of the local population in its factory, which, although distant from the river, depended on the continuous flow of irregularly manufactured chemicals. The closure of the company would mean mass unemployment for many families. Jennifer found herself in a deep ethical conflict. As a scientist and educator, her mission was to protect the natural environment that sustained the community. As a resident and part of that community, she understood the urgency of immediate economic needs. The solution came from an unexpected source: the community elders. For generations before industrialization reached the region, the inhabitants of Rivertown used traditional methods of filtering and purifying river water. Ancestral techniques using local plants, Natural settling systems and filtering volcanic rocks had allowed the water to be consumed safely. Working together, Jennifer and Emily Carter integrated this traditional knowledge with modern technology. They developed a hybrid purification system that combined natural filters with precise scientific monitoring. The project, presented to environmental authorities, received federal funding as a pilot model for the recovery of degraded areas. The old QTX factory was restructured, becoming a producer of filtration and purification equipment based on the developed model. Employees were retrained, many taking on roles in the new river environmental monitoring program. The local economy, which previously depended on predatory exploitation, reorganized around preservation. And what about Valiant? After lengthy discussions, the Army agreed to his early retirement, recognizing his crucial role in exposing the environmental crime. Officially released from military service, he remained in Rivertown, dividing his time between Jennifer and Emily Carter's homes, who had become inseparable neighbors and friends. Valiant's story forever changed the small riverside town. The German shepherd abandoned in a sack in the river became a symbol of resilience, loyalty, and redemption. His journey from near death to hero inspired the community to reassess its relationship with the river that gave them life. With Emily Carter's collaboration, Jennifer established a rehabilitation center for rescued animals and an educational program that combined environmental sciences with conservation ethics. The children of the region grew up learning Valiant's story and the importance of protecting all forms of life. For Jennifer, the personal transformation was as profound as that of the community. The teacher who had vowed never to become emotionally attached to an animal again after the painful loss of her cat, found in Valiant not only a companion, but a teacher of resilience and courage. Through him, she learned that the fear of loss could not prevent her from forming new, meaningful bonds. Some connections simply transcended the rational and needed to be embraced, even with all the emotional risks involved. On her morning walks along the bank of the now clean river, with Valiant trotting faithfully beside her, Jennifer often reflected on the twists and turns of fate, how a casual encounter on a foggy morning had triggered a series of events that transformed not only her life, but an entire community. And Valiant, with the silent wisdom that only animals possess, seemed to understand the magnitude of what they had achieved together. His amber eyes, once almost extinguished by suffering, now shone with a contagious serenity, as if to say, "See, sometimes from the most terrible circumstances, the greatest miracles can be born." The most valuable lesson Valiant taught Rivertown was about interconnectedness, the health of the river, the well-being of the animals, the prosperity of the community. Everything was intrinsically linked in a delicate web that required constant care. Every living being, however vulnerable it seemed, had its essential role in this fragile and precious balance. On full moon nights, Valiant still positioned himself by the window, but his howls had changed. They no longer carried the melancholy of loss, but sounded like a celebration, a hymn to life that persisted against all odds, to the river that continued to flow despite the obstacles, and to the community that had learned finally to honor its sacred waters.